Hello everyone. We'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll start because he got really a lot of interesting stuff regarding TensorFlow and not only that, in terms of machine learning as well. So after 2 minutes we'll start. I'll take hardly 1 minute to introduce about what we do as a community, and then I will hand it over to Akshay so that we won't lose a lot of time. We'll have a proper session. Why? Just 1 minute. Okay. Hey Akshay. Akshay is here.
Hello.
So people are still joining. You can,
Yeah, I mean, we
you
can
have,
wait for like 2, 3 minutes.
yeah,
All right. So before we start, I mean, yeah, so I think he has made me the window so I can share my screen. Okay. All right. I think that you guys can see my screen. I'm going to quickly go ahead
yes, Akshay.
and yeah, all right. It's fine. So what I'll do is I'll quickly start, sharing my screen. I'm going to discuss some of the things and then we can go ahead with the same. All right. So before we start, a bit about the session. So and a bit about myself. So my name is Akshay Bahadur. I'm a Google developer expert in machine learning. Basically, I get to work with all these technologies in TensorFlow, using TensorFlow, and of course, I get to work with folks from Google as well. Uh, so a bit about the session now. So the session is going to be a very basic one. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page when they're starting with machine learning. So we will not look at a lot of code, but we will look at a lot of application side where TensorFlow and machine learning has been effectively used, and how can it be used, going further down. So that is the main, inspiration behind the whole session. So I'll quickly go into the full screen mode. Yeah. So now this is how we will have the session. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides. These slides will have videos as well as some like textual information. Um, and this is of course not exactly a session. I'll say this is more of a discussion. So you can feel free to type in a question, raise your hand. Try to answer all of them at the end of the session. And of course, feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions. So let's start with this thought. Let's start. So the topic is applicability of TensorFlow. My name is Akshay Bahadur. You can find me at akshabahadur.com, and akshabahadur3 is my Twitter handle. So I just wanted to thank GD Chennai team for organizing the event, because I know it takes a lot of a lot of organization skills to actually have this event, especially in this kind of situation. So a big thanks to them, and I also hope that they are safe, and I also hope that everyone who's listening to the webinar is also doing well. And I'm also hopeful, and I'm confident as well that whenever the whole situation is back to normal, we are going to have more meetups, and we're going to definitely improve more of our technical skills. So look at the lockdown as more of an opportunity to explore a lot of things, because everybody's staying at home, so you might have a lot of time at hand which you can utilize. So uh, so yeah, that's good. Now a bit about myself. I'm Akshay Bahadur. I'm the Intel software innovator. I'm also Google developer expert in machine learning. So if you guys want to apply to any of these two community roles, I think they are pretty good, especially Google's one are pretty good. So I will definitely encourage you guys to have a look at that. Okay, so before we start, I try to play a video everywhere I go. Okay, and this video has been an inspiration since I think last 2 years, when I got into machine learning in 2017, I guess, and at that time I actually went into machine learning because I felt that it was pretty cool, and it was the hype at that time. I mean, it is still the hype. But yeah, and then I thought that I'll work on this cool stuff. I can make a lot of good impact. But then I saw the video, and this video has inspired me ever since. This actually played in Google I/O 2018. And this is about a story of a lady. Her name is Tanya, and how because even she had her own problems, even after facing a lot of problems of her own in her personal life, she was able to help Google actually improve their keyboard. So I'll play the video and we'll talk more after the video. There's a 2.5 minutes video if you want to know about the whole story. There's a blog also on this. So without further ado, let's quickly look at the video.
Akshay, can you like increase the volume of your video so that I mean,
Yeah, I think I probably what I'll do is I'll try to do a voiceover because I think GoToWebinar does not really have this option. But
uh,
anyway,
sure, sure, sure.
so yeah, so let's look at the video. So this is a story about a lady named Tanya, and as you can see that she does not have any motor functions below her neck, and this makes it extremely difficult for her to do day-to-day activities. So you can see these two pads which are on the back of her head. So she used them as dots and dashes in the Morse code, and these are some of the applications that she used previously, like a stick to point. But of course, that makes it really difficult. And now you can see that she already has a vehicle of her own, and that she is very courageous. She also has sky driven, and through skydiving, she met her husband, Ken, and of course, you know, uh, when such things happen, your partner has to be really helpful, in day-to-day activities. So these are some of the controls that they developed first because they wanted, Tanya wanted to have her own voice, and of course because everybody does not have such opportunity to actually help themselves. Therefore, she actually went ahead and went to the Google's keyboard team, and Google Keyboard wanted to integrate Morse code into their own infrastructure, as in on their own Google Keyboard infrastructure. So now, as you can see, that the mobile phone Google Pixel was connected to her the input signals that she gave using the bands near her head. You can easily now type in Morse code in Google's keyboard. So with the help of machine learning, with the help of artificial intelligence, a task that seemed a bit impossible in the past has now become quite possible for her. And because of Tanya, a lot of people who are suffering from such, you're not suffering, I'll say, but who have these special abilities can now live a normal life and don't need to depend on don't need to depend on other people. So this was a video that played at Google I/O 2018, and I felt it to be very inspiring because the main motivation behind any technology is to help mankind. And even if your solution helps only one person, I think the purpose is already solved. So I saw this video in 2018, and I felt really moved by it because you think about innovation, and that makes a lot of sense, and that's really courageous. But at the same time, helping someone when you are also when you also require help is, I think, one of the main qualities of a great leader. So although I never got a chance to talk to Tanya, but I will definitely have to do that in the future. But this story has always inspired me, and I hope that it has inspired you. So when you move out of this presentation, I hope that you take some of these concepts or some of these inspirations and try to apply that in your own life. So important link, go to bit.ly/gdg hyphen Chennai hyphen 20. If you click on the link, you will be transported to my GitHub page, which will have all the links for the meetup. So it has the slides, it has the meetup link. It also has an issue section. So let's say if you have any issues in terms of any technical problems or any problems related to technology, or want to just get started, feel free to do that. I will be more than happy to reply to your issues. All right. So let's look at artificial intelligence. So we will not go into detail. This is going to be, very basic understanding. So basically, AI is giving intelligence to your system. Okay, and there are a couple of ways to do it. In this particular section, we will try to look at machine learning, and machine learning is nothing but giving intelligence through data. So we can have other forms as well. We can have some algorithm that gives intelligence to the data, but we will not discuss that. We will only discuss about how a machine becomes intelligent after reading through data or reading through previous data. So this is what actually happens in the human brain as well. So let's say if I have to give a lecture, if I have to give a test on let's say computer science, or if I have to give a test on history, I read some of the books. Okay, and these books are basically data information which which I'm processing on, and then later I do a test based on these learnings that I got from the previous data or from my textbook. I am um, processing that information and I'm giving an output, or I'm giving a test. So this is a very basic form or a very intuitive form of learning. So let's look at how can we make a system from an ordinary system to a machine learning system. So we have an ordinary system. Okay, with the help of AI, what happens is we perform machine learning on that. We give data to the system, and our system will learn, it will predict, and it will improve over time. So there are three aspects that we discussed in this slide, and these three aspects are important.
Akshay, just sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
1 minute. We got one raise hand. Let me just quickly take that.
Yeah. Please do that. Yeah. If you can tell me, what exactly is the question, I can
Yeah,
directly answer, because
Karthik, I saw you raised hand, but you revoked it. You can raise
I think
hand
there
again.
might.
Question.
Yeah, I mean, if it was my mistake, that's also fine.
Yeah, raise Ahmed. Can you do you still face the same issue? Like you can't hear us again, or it's fine now? Okay, now it's fine. Okay. I guess it's because of some network issue. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Okay,
So
no problem.
don't worry. Even if you miss something, please ask again that after the session, and we will have the recording available. So the internet is like very much fine working with my end. So don't worry about that.
Yeah,
Video is getting recorded, and then we will put this on YouTube. So even if you miss something, don't worry. We have a complete recording on YouTube. So
yeah, makes
sorry to
sense.
interrupt, Akshay. You can continue with the session.
No, bro, please do that. So, I mean, if anybody has any question or anything, feel free to reach out to stop me at any time, because then I'll feel that everybody's attentive. So that's actually a good thing. All right, so we covered three aspects in machine learning. Three aspects as in what exactly is the benefit of having machine learning to a system. So these are: your algorithm learns. Okay, so basically your system, which was ordinary, which was not learning anything, with the help of machine learning, can now learn. It can improve its performance, over time, and it can make predictions for the future. And these three aspects are very important when it comes to machine learning, and we will just look at these three examples in detail when we look at some of the applications. All right, so let's quickly look at the applications. So I have actually categorized the applications into two parts. So in the first part, we'll look at some of the international applications. Okay, and this will be useful. This might be related to tech part. This also might be just for fun, but I included these because I thought that this would be fun. At the same time, it will be also pretty helpful for people to get an understanding. And at the same time, since the audio is not playing in the videos, I'll try to give you a brief description. And these videos will be very short. So anyway, we'll discuss in details after looking at the video. So the first example is of a wheat killing robot, and this was developed by some students from Stanford. And they basically, in the US, you don't have a lot of manpower. So a lot of the stuff in the agriculture fields are actually done using automation. So this was developed by some students from Stanford. Let's look at that, and we'll discuss this after looking at the video. So this is a weed killing robot. Okay. Uh, so basically, what happens is, you can see that they have built this smart robot. It has a solar panel at the top, and then it has a couple of cameras to see which plant is infected by a weed. And then it also has a robotic part where, based on the camera suggestions, it will go onto that plant, and then it's going to spray insecticide or pesticides just in the specific quantity. Now, the problem with infecting or giving insecticides basically is that if you give it in abundance, or if you give more than that is needed, it stays in the soil, and whenever there is rainwater, it's going to get transferred to the water bodies. Okay, and this has been a problem in India, especially. So now you can see that because this actually is a remote control, so you don't need to even do a lot of stuff. You just have to integrate it, and then you have to just go ahead and see what's happening, and everything is going to be taken care of by the robot itself. Of course, you have to maintain the robot, but that's still fine. Now, if you look at the problem is pretty prevalent. It must be a problem in almost all the countries, because I think agriculture is something that almost every country depends on. Now, if we look at India, the problem is, in Indian conditions, these might not really work because the soil is different, of course, the infrastructure is different, and of course, the cost to set up one such robot can be very high. And a farmer who is comes from a poor background or not very fortunate background, he will not have the resources to actually be able to use such a robot. So it's not important for us to actually build something, or developers or researchers to actually come up with something that is very interesting, and that could actually solve a lot of problems. So these two areas are, I think, my favorite, at least in India. These two areas are definitely agriculture, because almost 60% of the population is directly related to agriculture, and at the same time, healthcare is also another sector that I am pretty passionate about, because I feel that India, although it's working really hard and it's making a lot of progress in healthcare, at least India needs to at least some amount of work before we can say that our healthcare system is pretty good. So, but yeah, this is, I mean, I just wanted to show that, in other countries, there are a lot of good research going on, but you cannot just take that same example and then replicate it for India as well, because the conditions are entirely different. Now we look at another use case. So you might have, of course, heard of Tesla's self-driving car. So before they developed self-driving car, they actually did an autopilot test, and this test was basically they had a camera in one of the cars, and they were roaming around the streets of Paris, and they were trying to see what is actually the information they got from from the entire roads. And one thing to notice is the infrastructure will be different from a street in the US to the street in India. But let's look at the video first, and we'll try to discuss what exactly are the issues and how can India overcome it. So let's look at the video. So these are the streets of Paris. As you can see that this actually has different modules. So the one on the green is actually detecting the road. The red rectangles are for detecting big vehicles or four-wheelers. The yellow boxes are for detecting pedestrians. And in the future, you will see blue boxes for detecting two-wheelers. At the same time, you have some yellow lines which which will actually give you the path or the lane in which you want to, if you want to take a right turn or if you want to go straight. But the important thing to notice here is that you can see that the density is less, so the places are less dense. And if you want to maybe replicate the same thing in India, the infrastructure is different, the roads are different, people are different, and of course density is also different. So I actually have another video in which a couple of students from India have tried to do the same thing, but it makes it uh, slightly complicated. So we cannot replicate the same example directly from this autopilot version directly to India, because of course India has its own sets of conditions and problems. So this was the autopilot that the Tesla guys did initially, and this was and now you can, as you see, that Tesla has come a long way. But of course, as a starting point, I think this makes a lot of sense. Having a module-based application that you have different modules for different cars, pedestrians, two-wheelers, cycles. Now the third application is not actually an application. I was actually reading a research paper and I found it pretty interesting. So this is called as Everybody Dance Now. It is basically you can say a kind of a pose estimation and then video overlaying. So we'll first have a look at the video. It does not have a lot of applications per se, but I found it pretty fun. So let's look at the video. So this research paper was actually written by students from UC Berkeley. So based on a source subject, so now this is Bruno Mars dancing, and then these are the researchers from Berkeley. And now you can see that with the help of a machine learning algorithm that they developed, they were able to superimpose the movements of the source object onto the target objects. So this, I feel this can be useful at least maybe in the movie industry where the stuntman's source video can be directly overlaid onto the actors. So it does not make a lot of sense, I'll say, but of course it is fun. So this actually helps you understand how far the machine learning model has come. And similarly, you can have a lot of other source objects, and you can train a similar model to superimpose those movements onto a target object. So these are the three applications that we discussed. These were mostly in the yeah.
So we have one question from, actually we got three more questions. So, and
Yeah,
we
sure.
got one on this. So I'll just unmute the Durai Kutti for his question, and then you can take
Yeah,
another one.
please. Yeah.
Yeah, Durai, you can ask your question. We have unmuted you. Hello, Durai?
You can even post it in the chat section, or you can even post it in the question so that Yeah. So I think we had one question. Let me just quickly see. What if I think there was some question regarding the autopilot one.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
Is
want me to
Tesla
read it out?
using? Yeah, is Tesla using TensorFlow? I am not exactly sure if they're using TensorFlow or not, because they don't open source, of course, what they have. But TensorFlow is definitely one of the things that people use. And then of course PyTorch is also pretty famous. And Microsoft in all their AI platforms, they use PyTorch. So both of them are being used. But if you ask me, I think um, Tesla might be using something of their own. So you don't really know what exactly are they using. Now the other question is, did Tesla implement this feature and use now? So Tesla did. I am not exactly sure if they're using the feature now, because this was one of the initial tests that they did, and basically now they're using a lot of different algorithms together. So now they're using lidar, which is basically having sensors on camera. So they are not just depending on a camera; they're depending on camera plus sensors plus some infrared rays as well. So yeah, but then this will of course be one of the initial points. I'll discuss that. So I actually implemented some of the work that they did. I will show the video, and then things will get more clear to you. All right. So I think these are all the questions. Did I miss any question?
No, Akshay, you can proceed.
All right. All right. All right. Yeah, sure. So ask away all the questions. I'm more than happy to help. So we have discussed three applications from from outside of India, and now let's look at some applications which are in India, which people have done, and we will look at these in more detail, and then we'll try to discuss if there's any alternative that we could follow. Now, so already mentioned the self-driving approach that Tesla had. Now, I saw a video by some students. I saw it on LinkedIn. I found it pretty interesting. So I thought that I'll include this in this session as well. So they have tried to implement a couple of things. So that they have implemented lane detection, they have implemented pothole detection, and they have implemented blob detection, basically detecting cars and pedestrians. So let's look at the video. You can find the video, of course, on YouTube, and you can also have a look at the entire video using my site. So right now you can see that I think this is somewhere in the south, and they have detecting potholes. Now they're detecting vehicles and humans. So they have uh, specified different different boxes for cars, for motorbikes, and even for pedestrians, which are in pink or person. So now you can see that the density is quite high. The road infrastructure does not match quite a lot. Now this is a video from Delhi, and the students implemented a lane detection, and this was similar to what we saw in Tesla's autopilot, but of course the conditions will not be the same. Right now you are seeing that on you can say on a highway, but the actual conditions might be very different. So when it comes to developing something for India, companies has to take a lot of things into account. So people are making progress, but yeah, I think we have certain problems which are very unique to India, and it will take some time and some research by the Indian companies to actually solve these problems. Now there's a video or another video that I wanted to play. I actually saw the video on TensorFlow Roadshow in Bangalore. So basically, the TensorFlow team came from the US, and me and another friend of mine were called from India because we were community participants and we were doing good work. So all of us, we came together. We had an entire day for discussing TensorFlow, and this happened TensorFlow when TensorFlow 2.0 was released. Okay, so I saw the video about Air Cognizer. This was developed by students of IIT Delhi, and they had a couple of and this problem is very unique to India. This is actually very unique to Delhi. So you might have heard of the pollution in Delhi that happens during the I think summer. No, this happened during I think the winter months when you have fog plus smoke, and that forms a lot of smog, and the visibility is reduced. So let's look at the project now. Um, so let's look at the video. So this comes under Sesame project, and this is actually the traffic conditions in Delhi. You can see that because Delhi is landlocked, you have a lot of people that are coming in, and you have a lot of pollution as well as density is quite high. So this is how actually Delhi looks like when during the months of I think October, November, December, when and this is a majorly happens because of the crop burning that happens in Punjab, and the level of SO2 direct increases, the level of carbon monoxide, nitrogen monoxide increases, and the participate minor increases from 2.0 to 10.0. So ppm is basically parts per million. So you have a lot of pollution. So the students came up with an app. Okay, it's called as Air Cognizer. What happens in the app is that you just open the app, click a photo of the landscape, and they have a machine learning model that runs in the background. Okay, so you just simply click a photo and that is uploaded. Okay, so you can see that they have an input image, and they perform some sort of filtering techniques, and then they have trained their machine learning model on the cloud, and based on the image you can see that the AQI level, and of course at the bottom you can see a scale as well, so you can understand if it is pollution is very dangerous for you or it is not. And now they have a graph which tells us the actual information against the predicted ones, and they're using TensorFlow Lite, Firebase, MLKit. All these are given by Google as a service. So what they wanted to achieve was the application should be adaptive, it should be portable, and it can be used by anyone. So having it on a mobile phone makes a lot of sense because everybody can then use it. And this is the team members; these are the mentors that actually help them. As you can see that this problem is not universal, and this problem was very unique to Delhi. And some people or some students from Delhi thought came up with a creative way to actually address this problem using a technology. So of course, it is unfortunate that Delhi is going through these issues, and I hope actually that it does not happen in the future. But for the time being, at least students, at least all the residents of Delhi should have access to this app so that they can take a decision for themselves whether they want to go out or not, or how much is the pollution level at that particular day. Now, so this was a good story that I wanted to share. Now we'll come to Ame's story, and this has actually happened in GDG Pune. So personally, I feel that GDGs have a lot of have a lot of value. So the next video is about a guy named Ame. He's from Pune. He's a GDG member in Pune, and he actually had a solution in mind, and the GD team helped him really quite a lot because they actually gave him resources, they gave him exposure, they actually made sure that his solution could get into a product and could actually help people. So being a part of GDG Chennai, like everybody who's a part of GDG Chennai, I wish you all the best, because when you have a good solution in mind, people will definitely help you. So let's look at the video, and then we will discuss the video in detail. So this does not have anything to do with machine learning. This is actually an Android application. And this is about a story, Ame, and he actually had a dev section in his college. And of course, and this is of course Ame, he is from GDG Pune, and he saw all the students and they had a hearing problem. So basically thought of doing something. So there are two kind of hearing problems. First is there's a problem in the eardrum. Okay, so once when that is a problem, uh, you cannot hear anything through sound waves. But if we conduct something, or if we directly vibrate your inner ear, then you can hear some sounds. So even though your outer ear is damaged, your inner ear is still intact. So there are two ways to fix it actually. One is either you can have an operation, which is pretty expensive, and people from from humble backgrounds cannot afford it. Second is of course the Amaze idea. Amaze idea. Basically, what he did was he directly had an app. He had some sort of a hardware, okay, which could directly vibrate your inner ear. Okay, and once that vibration happens, even though your outer ear is damaged, you don't need a surgery. Your inner ear will be directly vibrated using this external device, and then you can hear sounds and perform all the daily tasks. So GDG as an organization is very helpful. So if you have any ideas, definitely reach out to the team. So yeah, so now you can see that this is actually the application that he developed. It can attach itself onto an Android device, and you can see that it is attached to top of the ear, and it can directly vibrate your inner ear through your to the side of your head. So yeah, so this is how it happens. And this actually, I did not get a chance to talk to Ame, but I got a chance to talk to the GDG team from Pune, and they're pretty excited, and I think they're doing a lot of market study, and also getting some second suggestions from the ENT specialists. And I think this is going to hit the market pretty soon, and it will be at a very low cost. So whenever we develop something for India, something that have to be kept into mind are definitely that the product could be replicated, because India has a large population. So if you are developing something for India, it should be scalable. At the same time, you also may want to make sure that the you also want to make sure that the product is actually not very expensive. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. I think these two aspects are really important when we have to develop something for a country like India. So this was Ame's story. Okay, pretty helpful. I felt that after seeing the video, I actually felt a sense of togetherness. I felt that the community is actually helping each other and actually looking at or solving some important issues that can be addressed in India. Now let's look at some open source contributions about my work and how could you go forward. I think if you have to actually excel in the field, or if you have to do good work in any field, I think open source contributions are very important. So I'm going to discuss about some of the applications that I developed. So the first one is Emojinator. So given the hand gestures, I was recognizing the emojis. Okay, this is one of the basic projects I think I did back in 2018. So now I have a machine learning model, and I also have some computer vision techniques in the back end. So what happens is I'm filtering out my image, I mean entire image from the webcam, and then I'm filtering out my hand, and then I'm using a machine learning algorithm to actually predict which emoji am I trying to say, or which emoji am I trying to depict. So this is one of the initial projects. It does not make a lot of sense up until now. I'll share a story later where all these things fall into place, and I actually develop something which I'm proud of. So this was one of the initial thing I thought I did because I thought it was cool. So yeah, so you can have a look at the video. It's all open source, so the code is also available. If you want to give it a try, that's also fine. Then I did something again. I went ahead and I uh, did an open source implementation of Google's Quick Draw. So Quick Draw is basically Google has open source a data set of around 12 million, 10 million drawings or doodles, and your machine learning model should be able to recognize these doodles quite efficiently. So this is what I did. Because I was good with computer vision, I integrated machine learning with computer vision, and I was drawing on the screen. So I was drawing the actual doodle on the screen, and the machine learning model was able to predict which doodle is it. So now you can see that I'm trying to draw a bow, uh, and a bow is predicted. Makes sense. So the one point to notice here is that I was able to integrate different learning. So I had experience with machine learning, I had experience with computer vision. I thought that I will probably use these two to make to develop an algorithm or to develop a program that could recognize your drawings using machine learning through webcam. So yeah, and the funny thing is that if you do open source contributions, it actually makes quite an impact. So you can see that real-time quick draw, which I did, is now part of Google's repository. So if you look at quick draw's GitHub page, you will find my implementation as well. Then we have already discussed about, yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. So basically, the whatever projects you are explained so far, so you have repositories available for those, right?
Yeah, so everything that I have mentioned is available on my GitHub page, github.com/akshabal21. So
Okay.
feel free to do that. And there are a couple of projects that I have not mentioned. I have also done, I think, some of the work in those fields. So have a look at all the repositories that I have. Mostly they're machine learning. Some of them are big data as well. So feel free to go through it. Let me know if you have any questions about that.
Yeah. So the main intention was, for this entire session is like we always talk about ML. We always, get started with ML. So we do Hello World. We do a lot of, image
Yeah.
segment, image recognition algorithms. But the actually main intention was today's session was, to make you aware of what are the real applications, real world application you could make, and you can do
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
So that is
Yeah, I
the
think,
reason, we plan not to do any hands-on session right now because we have planned, future sessions as well with Akshay where, he will be teaching you about how you can also get started with it. But before starting anything, we should be, pretty much aware of the real world application we are supposed to do because there are plenty of, resources available online, and I believe so a lot of people, just end up doing only image recognition and that's all. So
yeah.
the main focus was this session was to make you aware, what are the applications you can really make it up.
Yeah. So the main app, the main thought behind the session was, of course, give you an overview of what is actually machine learning, and then of course developing. If you want to develop something for India, it has to be very unique. It has to be entirely. It might be entirely different from any other implementation. At the same time, I have also covered some of the latest thing that Google is actually working on, and it is actually related to India. So we will discuss that in detail as well. But yeah, I mean, I actually have planned with Abhishek to, if you guys like this session, if you want to go deep dive into some of the work that I have done, or if you want to deep dive into any other technical aspects, we can plan future sessions. But for that, I think physical meetup is also very important. So uh, for the virtual meetup, I just feel that, getting you started, or at least getting you inspired, you guys should have an idea of what exactly these algorithms do. So coming back, um, So yeah, so basically coming back, I just want to discuss another project that I did, and this is actually a research paper by NVIDIA. So we have already saw what Tesla did with autopilot. Okay, that was in Paris. Now, actually, NVIDIA also released research papers. Okay, so the research paper that they released is end-to-end self-driving cars, end-to-end learning for self-driving cars, and this was actually done by some folks from NVIDIA. Uh, the important thing that I noticed is that they had a research paper, they had data sets online available. So I thought that, I'll just give it a try. I read the research paper, found it pretty interesting. But the problem that I saw in that implementation was that they were using a lot of resources. Okay, so they were using around 30 GB of RAM. They were using GPUs for training. And coming from India, coming from middle class background, I did not have access to all those things. And at that time, Google Cloud was not very popular. So what I did was, because I had prior workings with computer vision, I had prior understanding of how data looks, how data works. So what I did was, I thought that instead of working with such huge amount of data, why don't I filter out the information that I need? Okay. So when I talked about filtering, basically, I will not discuss in details because that might be beyond the scope. But I actually had written my own filters, which could which would get the information from the entire image. So this module that they developed, or the research paper talked about, how if you are given the image of a road, you have to predict the steering angle of the road. Okay, so basically, given an image of the road, you have to predict what angle should your steering be so that you are on the correct path. So this is one of the modules. Other modules are, of course, as you saw already, are pedestrian detection, or car detection, or path planning. So this comes under path planning. Given the image of the road, you have to detect the steering angle. So I developed a lightweight model. I came up with filtering techniques. I thought that I don't have resources, so let me develop a lightweight model. So now you can see that my model works okay. Not very well with pedestrians, so that you can see that it's turning towards the left, but that's fine. Now you can see that I have to take a right turn. The road images are going towards the right, so I took a right turn. And this model works specifically well if you're working with low density road. So right now I think this is a country road or maybe a highway in India. So you can see, because there are less pedestrians, there's less noise in the image. My sitting angle is almost actually accurate 100% of the time. So right now I have to take, let's say, steer towards the left. So my model is working that. Now I think I have to take a right turn. So my model knows that I have to take a right turn, and it is taking a right turn accordingly. So the important point was that not only I worked on a research paper, but at the same time I tried to improve that research paper based on the conditions that I had. So if I have to develop something for India, I cannot depend on resources, because to put it simply, India at this point does not have the freedom of having a lot of resources. So this was my implementation, and the actual implementation you can find on my GitHub page as well. It's called as autopilot. Uh, so yeah, actually made me realize a lot of things, that if I have to develop something for India, it has to be Indian enough. Now, what I wanted you to understand is, there are three aspects to a great presentation. Okay, so the first is the content. So I thought all the videos that I showed you was actually the content of the presentation. The second part is, of course, a story. I want to develop a story. That the story that I chose to develop, or that I tried to develop, was to share the applications of machine learning specifically towards India. Now, the third thing that I want you guys to have is a takeaway, and that is the most important aspect. So let's discuss the takeaways in detail. What exactly do I want you guys to take away from this presentation? Before we do that, there's actually an experiment that happened by Mark Rober. So Mark Rober is actually a researcher from NASA. He did his master's from University of Southern California. So the experiment is like this: you have given a car and an endpoint. You have to basically use these information, or these blocks, to make sure that your car starts from the start point and it ends at the end point. So now you see that I am trying to do the same thing, but it's not working fine. You can see that there's some problem with my solution. So then I thought that it should move forward. So I added a code block. So now if I start the experiment, now I'm able to do the same thing. I'm able to move from my starting point and go towards the end points. Now you notice that, let's say if you failed, you will get two options. Okay, so you will get one option is that it did not work, please try again. Okay, and at the bottom you can also see that you also have some total score. So the total score is 200 points, and these points does not have any value in the real world. Okay, so you will not get paid, you will not get any recognition. Nobody is even going to know if you have scored this much amount or not, but it was something that they just came up with. So if you fail in the first attempt, you will get two options. First is that that did not work, please try again. Or the second option is that if you failed, they will deduct 5 points from your entire score. So out of 200, if you fail once, you will get a total of 195 points. And these points don't make any sense. Okay, so these points have no value, no monetary value. It's only psychological. So there are a couple of observations that he made, and I found it pretty interesting. So we saw that out of all the people that solved the problem, if there were minus 5 points after every wrong attempt, only 52% of the people actually went ahead and solved the problem. Whereas if there was no penalty, 68% of people were solving the problem. And that is a substantial rise. Now, another important observation is that if you're detecting 5 points every wrong attempt, people were only giving it 5 tries on an average. And if they fail, they will just leave it and not come back. Whereas if there were no penalties, the success rate was high. At the same time, the number of people were actually trying it more times, more than double. So what we have observed here is that uh, people are actually afraid of being, or not afraid, but they're actually hesitant if somebody is looking, or they're hesitant of failing. And that makes a lot of sense because, even me, I will probably stop doing something or if I will be very careful if I have a fear of failure. But from this experiment, it was obvious that with no penalty or with no failure in the back end, people actually put more effort than the average people do. Okay, so now I would just want to have discuss the point that you if you have anything in mind, don't really think about it. Of course, there are a lot of issues when it comes to developing something. Don't look at it as a failure, even if you are not able to complete a task in time. It's still fine as long as you're learning, as long as you're having fun. I think that will be more than enough. So now another thing that I just wanted to share quickly is the Google's AI lab that recently opened in Bangalore, and they're doing a really good work. So this is the map of all the AI labs in the world. And here we have our own lab in Bangalore. And you can see that they have a lot of labs in the US. Then they have a lot of lab in Ghana as well. They have a couple of labs in Europe, and they have some labs, I think, in Japan. So Bangalore is one of them. I think I'm extremely proud of having an AI lab in Bangalore because now researchers can actually work on problems which are very unique towards India. And that's what the team is doing. So they're actually working on different problems. So one of them is detecting diabetic eye disease. Second one is flood forecasting. Flood forecasting is pretty common in northern India, at least in Bihar. And that, of course, helping teaching. I mean, they're helping the students if they want to read something. If their parents are not from a very privileged background, they don't have a lot of access to education. So with the help of a mobile application, they're trying to do the same thing. So let's look at diabetic eye disease. Okay. So on the left, you can see a healthy image, healthy eyesight. And the right, you can see that there are certain, uh, you know, certain, you can say, concentrations of hemorrhages. And with the help of this, we can easily detect if a person has diabetes or not. So it's going to be really helpful for healthcare people because detecting diabetes at an early stage is very important so that people can be given enough medication in time. And of course, flood forecasting is pretty important. So they have an app, not an app. Basically, Google itself, it sends you notifications. Basically, if you are if you are in the flood affected regions, then they will send you a push notification, and then they also show you that we have forecasted this based on our machine learning algorithm. and it can be a severe situation. So probably take the necessary precautions. Now they have also developed an app called as Bolo, teaching kids how to read. And this app looks like this. So basically, they have stories, and you can open any story and you can read it out. And machine learning algorithms actually sees if you are doing it justice or not, or if you are actually pronouncing all the words correctly, and it will give you points accordingly. Okay. And I think other applications are they're also teaching you how to spell. So people who who does not have very fortunate backgrounds can use the application and teach the kids how to spell things or how to uh, read. So these things are, of course, these three applications that I discussed is pretty unique towards India, and I also felt that going forward, because of this AI lab in India, and of course, other companies are also developing AI research centers in India. It will be especially useful for these problems which are very unique towards India. Okay, so I have shown a couple of things to you, but you must be wondering, what have I done, which I could say that I'm proud of. So around last year, I started working on this problem. It's called as Indian Sign Language Recognition, or ISLAR. And I developed this thing because I actually, wanted to just work on something which could be helpful for people, which I thought that this could be useful. And I saw these videos by Amey, and this inspired me, and I thought that I'll just give it a try. So basically, what is that? The project demonstrates the use of machine learning to develop and standardize an Indian Sign Language recognition system. So this was the main problem statement that I wanted to work on. So I wanted to develop and standardize an sign language recognition system for India. Now let's look at the problem statement. Around 40 million people in India have speech and hearing impairment, and within 80 kilometers, that's difference between Mumbai and Pune. Pune is where I work, Mumbai is where my family is living. So the sign language becomes different. So they have these subtle variances in sign language. So I wanted to use machine learning to make sure that these sign languages can be merged into, or these subtle differences at least can be merged into one. Now, the other thing that I mentioned is the problem with sign language is that the sign language is different within different regions in India. So basically, if the sign language in Chennai, or maybe Tamil sign language, or Kannada sign language from Bangalore are different from the sign language in North India, and that happens because of the language being different. So Marathi coming from a different language and Kannada coming from a different language will have different signs for different gestures or different phrases. So that's the main problem that I faced. And of course, I also wanted to make sure that my machine learning algorithm was very low weight, or it could work on low resources. It was very lightweight. So I worked on the preparation part. So basically, I went to a research center in Pune itself. It's a center for deaf and youth, and I actually worked with the students there. So these are the students that they were actually helping me understand the different issues with sign language and what are the issues that they face in day-to-day life. And right now, they're actually helping me. So these are all the alphabets that happen. So this is the alphabet J, then L, then this is M, and then this is N. And similarly, they actually helped me gather data set. And I actually learned sign language for about 6 months before working on the project. So you can have a look at the entire video. It's around 5 minutes long. I'll go on to the next thing. So then I started developing work in phases. So this was the phase 0. I understood that I was only working with hand gestures. So right now you can see that these are only just hand gestures. Then I incorporated both the hand gestures, like left hand and the right hand. So these are all the alphabets. In the previous slide, we only have the numbers. So this was the actual implementation that I did. So I did a semantic color segmentation, which is basically segmenting out a particular color from the entire image, and then using a machine learning model to make predictions. So this is one of the prototypes that I did. So it kind of made sense at that time. But later down the line, I realized that sign language does not only have to do with your hand gestures, it also has to do a lot of things with your facial key points. Okay. So what I did in the next phase was that I developed a machine learning model for tracking my facial key points. And at the same time, I was also keeping a track of my hand gestures. So right now what you can see that I'm not working on the entire image. I'm just working on the filtered image. And the filtered image, because it only has my facial features and my hand gestures, it is actually very fast. And the model that I developed could be lightweight. Okay. So let's look at the implementation. So this is one of the prototypes that I did. Okay, so you can see that I have a facial key point tracking system, which is tracking my facial key points. Then at the same time, I'm also getting my hand gestures, or getting my hand gesture at the same time. And in the background, I have put a lot of clothes because I wanted to make sure that I want to test my model with noise in background. So you can see that I'm not working on the actual image. I'm working on the image or the filtered image on the right hand side. So this can be very powerful. This can be done. I mean, the inferencing can be done pretty quickly, and the predictions can take place a lot quicker than if I was working on the entire image. So with the help of my interest in machine learning, and with the help of my intuition from computer vision or image processing, I was able to do this. And I was fortunate enough to actually go to Google's headquarters in California to present my work. So this is a video. So I actually traveled to California. I shared my work with Google, and they were quite interested in that. So I actually went to their the headquarters, and I talked to the TensorFlow team. If you want to have a look at the entire video, it's on my YouTube channel. You can find the link to the slide itself. And it's around 8 minutes long. I try to discuss a lot of things, and I got a lot of good feedback from the TensorFlow team on how I could improve my algorithm and how could I proceed forward if I have to make this actually be useful for the entire Indian population. So now the most important aspect is how could you help? First is, of course, identifying problem is very important. In my case, uh, I identified sign language is something that is problematic, and then I had a rough draft in mind. You can also have a rough draft also. It should not be the final product. It should be at least having a basic starting point that this is how it would look like at the end. And of course, it can keep on changing. And it's important to understand the skills or the things that you have and what do you need. So in my case, I did not know sign language, so I went to an institute. I learned sign language for a couple of months, and then I started developing the project. Learn skills and get assistance. I learned sign language. At the same time, I asked my friends also to help me, to give me a perspective. So it's very important because you cannot learn all the things in one go. That's something that nobody can do. So it's important to understand what are your key points, or what are your main as in your strong points. And the last and the most important point is to just get started, because I took a lot of time to get started. I thought that it could be done pretty easily, so I kept delaying it. I kept procrastinating, but at the end, I actually felt that I could have started a bit earlier. But anyway, the good thing is that I actually started, and I ended up doing a lot of good things with my projects. So this is it from the whole session. I hope you had a lot of fun. I am willing to answer any questions that you have. More than happy to help. And these questions you can ask right now. You can ask me later. You can email me. You can ask me on GitHub. You can ask me on a personal website. I am available at almost all times. Of course, give me feedback. So if you like the session, if you feel that I could improve some of my projects, you can improve my techniques, feel free to do that. Go to akshaybahadurcom and feel free to give me a feedback, or you can even do that in the slide section. You can open an issue, say that the implementation that you mentioned is not very good. I will try to improve on it and get back to you. So this is it from my side for the session. My name is Akshay Bahadur. You can find me on akshaybahadurcom. For the link, you can go to bit.ly/ddg-chinmay-20, which is going to redirect you guys to my page, or my GitHub page, which has a slides, which has a meetup link. You can talk to me on GitHub, as an open an issue, and I'll try to reply back. And you can get connected to me over email or LinkedIn. Any way is fine. So this was it about the session. Now I'm going to ask you guys if you have any questions, and also at the same time, I will also answer some of the questions or the most answered questions. I mean, the most frequently asked questions that I had.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, Akshay, thanks a lot. Actually, I mean, you had plenty of examples to show. Like when I was not here, like this kind of application, we could actually solve it. Especially, those eardrums.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I see there are a lot of questions right now available, not only related to machine learning, but how to be an expert as well. So we'll take the question one by one. So before we start, so we'll take audience question first, and then the sort of questions you usually get in your session, we will also take care of that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, I can see a few questions like just starting with ML,
yeah.
start learning with courses or any other resources. So many
So I'll
things
do one
are
thing.
out
I'll
there.
just read it
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
loudly so that everyone who is attending this webinar can listen to those questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's one question from Gokul.
Yeah.
I really like this question because he's saying that can we share the path for beginner in machine learning as a Google developer expert? So
Okay.
basically, I understand it like okay, Gokul. So perspectives from how do you be a Google developer expert in ML? If right now
Mhm.
I'm a beginner, how I can go to the part of that?
Okay, yeah. So first of all, I think there is no. I will not say that there is a fixed roadmap that if you do all these things, you'll become a Google developer expert or you will become a machine learning engineer. So the main point that you guys should strive for is getting your basics correct. So doing online courses definitely help. I can share my journey. So I started work. I started with the couple of courses on Coursera. So I started with Andrew Ang or Andrew NG course on Coursera. But it was up to me to actually, make sure that I did my homework because in that course or in any course there will be some information that you have to that you will not that you will not have gained previously. So in Andrew NG course or Andrew Ang course, I had less knowledge of statistics. So I went back, I studied statistics, and then I came back, I did the course. And then after that, I did other courses, deep learning specialization from Coursera. And after that, I started working on my own implementations. And these implementations I did not do for getting into Google Developer Experts. I actually did it because I wanted to make sure that I was understanding what I've learned. Okay. So all these things definitely, and then of course being a part of the community helps. So if you are active on GitHub, if you're active on GDG, if you're active on DevFest side, they are also very important. Have a blog of your own. If you're doing some good work, note it down and share it with the world because that's how open source works.
I also have few points to share in this perspective because
Yeah.
so so there is no hard and fast rule, like you have to be a GD or something like that. So basically, what happens is GD is a program where actually Google recognizes your work
Yeah.
as expert in that particular field. So GDG in machine learning or GDG in any technology, any Google technology. So the very first, or I would say the thumb rule is you are you really know in and outs of that particular technology. So basically, if you want to be a GDE expert in machine learning, so the community contribution matters a lot when when they interview. There's a criteria basically where they will see how much contribution you have done so far in TensorFlow or in machine learning field. So definitely you should have an idea of what you're doing and what in which field you want to apply for. And there's a procedure to apply. So at least there should be a 6 months of record where you have answered questions on Stack Overflow, or you are writing a blog, or you are giving a lot of talks on meetups, this sort of things. And apart from that, you can reach out to us, like each GDG group or community group, they can refer you for applications of GDE. So if you are sure, like, hey, I feel like I'm really good in this, I'm good in Angular or I'm good in machine learning. So we can actually fill application behalf of you so that we can refer you to a DevRel team where they can, interview you as an expert. And if you crack that interview, then you will be a GD. So this is how it works, but a contribution matters a lot before you apply for, GD. So still
Yeah.
this
So
this works everywhere. So if you still feel like, like, hey Abhishek, hey Som, we are really good in this field. Can you please refer us to for a GD application? So we will be doing that. That's not a problem.
yeah,
So there is always a plus point if you go through us, because we know you have done a lot of work in community. So that has a plus point.
yeah, definitely.
Let's take another question. I hope Gokul, your answer is, like this is what expected answer is. So the next question comes, which is really good question, I feel so, because even I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of questions regarding this.
Okay.
So Rajat is asking, like he has just started learning machine learning, and from where
Mm-hmm.
he can start learning. So because there are plenty of plethora of resources available on internet, Coursera,
Mm-hmm.
Udemy, Edureka, and a lot of things. So he's pretty confused, and he also has a 1+ year of experience in Python coding. So how would you recommend to to have proper resources?
I think definitely. I think Python coding is really good because it gives you a good background on if you want to get started. I did not have any Python experience before this, so I actually had to learn Python as I went along. So the resources, as already mentioned, I think there are a lot of resources available, and I don't feel that any resource is bad because you'll get to learn at least something from each resource. But then at the same time, I will also say that go with something that is fits your pocket as well. So don't really go for a resource which is really expensive because I actually don't encourage that. Um, but at the same time, I think Coursera. I can tell about my journey. So I do a lot of I do courses on Coursera because they are less expensive, and you can apply for financial aid. So at that time when I was learning, I was not working. I was a student, so I could apply for a financial aid, and I could get the course for free. And at the same time, I think there are other resources like Udemy, which is pretty good. Yeah, you also have some blogs. So you have two blogs which I follow. We have Towards Data Science, which is a good blog which I follow, and then you also have IMED Search, which is a good blog, and then of course you can find other resources on Medium. So everything, I think everything makes sense, and of course I think reach out to to your GDG team, reach out to Abhishek. I think he can definitely guide you guys because Google also has its own blog, and at the same time the I think important aspect is to attend meetups because at the meetups you get to actually see what other people are doing, what other mentors or researchers are working on, and then they can actually help you with a better understanding.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely we can help in gathering the resources. So a quick tip,
Mm.
if you really want to get started with it, the first thing, Google Code Lab is one of the best
Yeah.
resources if you
Yeah,
want to do hands-on,
yeah.
because
I will.
they follow a
I
lot of
have
models.
shared the link of. I have shared a couple of links, code labs that you can get started with on TensorFlow and machine learning, so people can make use of it. So usually on all of our GDG meetups, we used to share these code lab links, so which
Yeah.
will have almost all the topics covered. Not only for machine learning, you can choose of your in your own interest, like Android or.
Yeah, and apart from that, it's if you don't want to do that, and if you really want all list of all the resources, what you can do is you can just Google it, awesome TensorFlow, uh, and this applies for every technology where you get a GitHub repo of that technology. So they have a
Yeah.
complete list of all resources. So you just Google it, awesome TensorFlow, you'll get a GitHub repo where everything related to that particular technology. Let's say if you search for TensorFlow, everything related to TensorFlow, you will quickly get it. So that best courses plus best blogs and practical examples and all, you can go with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing. And we all so coming to our next question, we have from Harish Ravi Kumar. So sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. So his question is it required to know Python to know TensorFlow?
I will basically so if you know any language, that's good enough. So I am pretty good with Java, so I'm pretty comfortable with Java. But at the same time, because TensorFlow is a library for Python, it will actually help if you know at least the basic syntax of Python. But let's say even if you know Java, that's also fine because you have the logic in place. You know what are the data structures that are used in Python as well, because both of them will have almost same data structures, and just use that to develop your program. So having a basic knowledge is good enough. You don't need to actually go ahead and learn Python. If you know Python, that's fine. If you don't know, maybe just go through the basics of it. And once you start working on TensorFlow, you will get to know some more concepts of Python. So I think just basic understanding is good enough.
Yeah, again, just to add the point to that. So
Yeah.
even if you don't know Python, it's fine because TensorFlow.js is available in JavaScript. So if you want to do, web application which requires a TensorFlow to be used, you can literally go with TensorFlow.js where you don't need to learn Python at all. And apart from that,
Mhm.
even if you want to do some sort of, experiment in your Android phones or even apps, so there's something called TensorFlow Lite, which is, complete SDK available to be imported in your mobile apps, so you can do that. So if you are pretty good in web development, you should go with TensorFlow JS instead of learning Python and doing that. But yeah, learning Python is quite easy, so you can follow that approach as well.
Yeah.
Also, Firebase has ML Kit. If you
ML
are
Kit, yeah.
not, yeah, if you're not totally into like ML, but you still you want to use the generic APIs like face recognition or text recognition, you can check out ML Kit.
Yeah. Now, please do. Okay, sure. So there's one question from Vigneshwar. So he's saying, okay, please do conduct a training on uses of TensorFlow. Yeah, Vignesh. Sure, we will do that. I mean, we just wanted to get started with basic. What are the applications of that? And we are also planning Akshay and then some other folks as well, where we can conduct a training or hands-on session on TensorFlow. So don't worry about that. We will be doing that. So meanwhile, you can follow the code labs where a basic of Hello World of TensorFlow. You can experiment that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, there's a question from Harish. He's asking, how long does it take to learn TensorFlow?
So I think this is pretty subjective. Except let's say if somebody has a good understanding of machine learning beforehand, he can pick it up quickly. So I'll tell you my case. It definitely is not. It is not like that you will learn TensorFlow within a day or two. It takes time. So if you're a beginner, if you have no idea what machine learning, I will say it is going to take around 3 to 4 months to get started, and then another 3 to 4 months to get comfortable. So within 5 to 6 months, I think you will have a good understanding of TensorFlow. But yeah, of course, I will also encourage you to guys to get your basics right. So even if you take your own time, even if you take more than 4 or 5 months, that's also fine. So yeah, I think 3 to 4 months, 3 to 5 months are something that you could say that you will get a good idea about TensorFlow.
I hope that answers the question. So next question we have from Madhura. She's pretty active community member as well. So
Yeah.
she got like some sort of advanced question, I would say. So she's
Mm-hmm.
saying like with the concept of federated learning coming up, how well do you think TensorFlow federated, that is TFF, can be used up to a production level? And would it be happy if you could suggest some tutorials for same?
Okay, so yeah, so I think this is an advanced concept. So TensorFlow federated is basically instead of having basically collaborating machine learning without a centralized. Basically, you don't want to have a centralized training data when you are working with TensorFlow, because if you are working with a lot of data, you cannot have that entire data on one machine. So I will say TFF production level, I don't feel at this point that they are ready at this point. And with a lot of APIs that comes with TensorFlow 2.0, I think they are getting there. So they have TensorFlow tf.data, which is getting data pipelines ready for this developing a machine learning pipeline. So I think it they are going on to that at that stage of having a production level federated TensorFlow. So some tutorials that I will suggest using TensorFlow federated is, of course, I think the best blog that you could refer to is, of course, the official documentation. So with TensorFlow 2.0, you can actually see that they are introducing TensorFlow federated for for their TensorFlow module. So have a look at that. It's on blog.tensorflow.com or blog.tensorflow.org. Have a look at that, and at the same time, you can find some good resources on YouTube. So they also have a TensorFlow channel on YouTube. So the TensorFlow Dev Summit that happened this year was directly broadcasted onto the channel. So if you go to Google, just type TensorFlow Federated Learning and you will get some good links. I will recommend the blog and definitely the video. All right, I hope that answers your question. Hello.
Okay, sorry, I
Abhishek,
was on mute. Sorry, I was on
Yeah,
you
mute.
yeah,
were on
no,
mute.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah,
thanks for asking that question. Madhura, if you
okay,
still have some question, you can ask. And apart
yeah,
from
yeah,
that, folks, what I was saying is you can raise your hand if you don't want to, type your question. So we will
yeah.
unmute you and
Please
then
do that.
you can talk directly. So next question is
Yeah.
from Devya, and he's asking he is unable to optimize his model, and he is using a grid search CV, and but still his model is overfitting. Can you just give him some tips?
I think in general, I mean, of course, if I have to give you a very specific answer, I have to look at the code and the data set that you're working on. But to give you a very, I mean, whenever I work with whenever I get overfitting as a problem, I'll probably look at my first of all, I look at my data set. I want to make sure that my data set is not skewed. That is, my data set has equal class balance, which basically means that the number of examples, positive examples, should almost be equal to the number of negative examples. If not, then probably go for data augmentation, that is creating your own data. If you're working with images, of course, I'm assuming that you're working with images. So that is going to definitely bring imbalance to your data set. Other things are that you mentioned about grid searching. So grid searching is definitely a good technique where you want to find out the hyperparameters, like the optimized hyperparameters. So I think that's a good approach, but at the same time, there is no cure that cures all the problems. So it has to be a combination of your data set. It has to be clean enough. Second is, of course, what you're doing grid search. Third is, of course, if you're overfitting, probably think of some regularization, maybe drop out layers. And at the same time, you also want to make sure that you optimize your network architecture. So maybe some of the time what happens is you are using a different number of neurons in your network. You want to increase that, decrease that, or maybe come up with another architecture. So all these 3-4 points, I think you have to try it out. There's no particular answer that if you do this, your model will not overfit. It can overfit at any point, but then do some visualization. Basically, where exactly is it overfitting, or how exactly which of the feature is causing it to overfit, and then you can optimize on that. So it's
Yeah.
slightly technical. If you want to clear your doubts, probably you can reach out to me on my website or on my LinkedIn. I can share some of the blogs.
Yeah, I would I would recommend the best to do that, because if you're still unable to, find a solution, you can
Yeah,
definitely reach out. He has a nice
yeah.
chatbot on website. You can ping him there, and he
Yes, I
will
have a
reply.
chatbot on my website, so I will definitely reply most of the time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So there is one more actually for the same question. Jui has answered like you can use SAP where which can help you in identify why it's overfitting. So
So SAP is basically, I mean, basically you can identify which feature is actually causing your whole model to overfit. So yeah, SAP is definitely good if you are working on image data. Maybe you can go for, they have this image visualization, or your CNN visualization technique. I think it's called as SHAP or something, or grid SHAP. You can use that to actually see which area of the image is being activated, and then you can identify your overflow pattern,
Yeah. So,
overfitting pattern.
and if you want to know more about Sharp, you can actually ping Jui. She has already worked on
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
She has
please do that.
research, basically internship. Not internship, some sort of diploma in that. I'm really not sure, but you can reach out to Jui. She will definitely help you. Okay, and now we have a next question. We will not take more time. Okay, don't worry. I know like we are doing this from 1:30. So next question is: Can Kaggle use cases be considered for a problem statement to start with?
I think you can definitely use Kaggle, to get started. But I will recommend to maybe, because the problem with Kaggle is that the data set that you get is quite clean, and you also don't have to worry about the data preparation part, because they already give you a CSV file, or they have already given you a zip file which contains all the information. But in real world, what happens is that you have to actually get your own data set. You have to create your own data set. So gathering the data is also pretty important aspect. So Kaggle is good. It's a good starting point, but I will also recommend to maybe work on some real world problems which are not a part of Kaggle, because then you will get to know a lot of other aspects which are important when it comes to training a model.
Yeah, that's right. But on the same note, if you are like very beginner in that, like sorry, if you are
Yeah,
a beginner in that, you can definitely go with Kaggle datasets because you don't have to worry about all those data
yeah,
wrangling parts. Okay.
that's correct.
But
Yeah,
if you want to solve any real world problem, of course, those data has to come from those domains.
yeah,
Now the next question we have again, will you be doing hands-on TensorFlow in GDG? Yeah, Harish, we are planning for that and we'll keep you posted on meetup page. So just keep an eye on that. We'll definitely doing some hands-on session on TensorFlow. And okay, so I guess that's all we have so far. And no, so there's one more question from Gokul again. Is it
yeah.
is it good that we can use dataset in datasearch.research.google.com, which is a dataset search engine recently Google, released. So are there good
Yeah, I think
quality of that's available?
Yeah, I think that's good. So as already mentioned, let's say if you're a beginner, even if you're not a beginner, if you want to just see, then of course go with Kaggle.com, go with uh, Google's data search search engine, dataset search engine. Of course, you can even go for some other data set that you get. So we also have, I think, dataset repository in the University of California at Irvine. So they have also a repository. So if you search for UCI-ML, you will also get a page which the university actually created for their own students. So, and they have now open sourced it. So you can get the dataset from there as well. So important point is, of course, the getting the dataset is the easy part, but then at the same time, you have to do your own exploration. So even in Kaggle, even though I have mentioned that the data set is clean, but at the same time, sometimes what happens, they actually make the data set um, dirty intentionally, so that you have to first clean the data, then do some pre-processing, and then do your learning. So it's a good approach. I'll say that, going with other forms, not just Kaggle, or creating your own data set. I think other forms are also pretty useful. So definitely give it a try. So I hope that answers your question.
Abhishek, if you are speaking, you are on mute for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, I keep muting myself because I don't want any interruption from my
yeah,
side.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
Google, I hope that answered your question. Now, next question is from Thiru Balaji, who is asking about like, what are the mathematical concepts you need to understand for image processing and TensorFlow?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, they don't really, they forget to give the importance to mathematics, but I feel that mathematics is really, really important. So, so for mathematics, I will recommend 4 areas. First is statistics. So statistics is important because you will have some concepts which are pretty important, or which are very unique to statistics, such as maximum likelihood, So some of these concepts basically important. Second is of course probability. So probability is pretty important. So basically in any machine learning algorithm, what we're trying to do is, given a set of features, what is the probability that the image is of a dog? Okay, and then maybe given a set of features, what is the probability that the image is of a cat? And basically the machine learning model actually calculates the probability of whether the image is a cat or a dog. So probability is very important, statistics are important. Linear algebra and calculus are these four aspects which I will definitely mention, and definitely hope that you guys get a good hands-on experience on. So statistics, linear algebra, calculus, and probability.
Okay, I think that answers. The next question is PyTorch or TensorFlow?
Okay, so that I think this is a great question. PyTorch or TensorFlow. I will say if you're a beginner, then go with high-level API. So maybe go with Keras. But yeah, I think both of them are okay. PyTorch is personally prefer TensorFlow for some production level code, as in if I'm deploying something, and I prefer PyTorch if I have to get something done quickly. So basically, all the research work mostly is being done in PyTorch, and the industry-oriented work is doing in TensorFlow. I think it's mostly up to your taste. Even though I'm a Google developer expert in machine learning, Google never forced me to use TensorFlow. So they just wanted the developers to have good understanding of machine learning. It doesn't matter if you use TensorFlow or PyTorch.
Okay, the next question is what are the recommended approach to prepare noisy text data or text documents to train a model? I have cleaned it. Yeah, the question is still there. I have cleaned it and used tokenization for the data and word embedding to vectorize it. But I feel this approach is not good. Do you have any recommendation for document to vector?
Yeah, definitely. I think document to vector. What I will recommend is, of course, I mean, basically, I have mostly worked on computer vision, so NLP is something that I am still exploring. But definitely, I think your question is very valid, because I also face this question that because the problem with data or problem with words is that there are so many words that it becomes difficult, even though you vectorize it. Visualizing a vector space becomes difficult. So what I will recommend is have and that goes for every machine learning model, is that you should have good visualization that is intact. Okay, so for images, the visualization is not very difficult, because you can see the images at the same time. You have certain techniques like I think not exactly sure remember the name, but you can actually visualize which of the filters are getting activated when an image is passed through it. So it makes sense. It helps understanding. At the same time, I actually will share a blog where you can use your vector. So basically, you can save the embeddings that you have, and then you can visualize them in um, your n space dimension, and then you can see basically what happens. Let's say if to give a very easy example, let's say if I'm trying to solve, given a review, if it is good or bad. Okay, so I have a review of a movie. I have to identify that it is a good review or it's a bad review. So what happens is, if I did the same thing, I clean the data, vectorize all of the words embeddings, and then when I visualize it, I can see that on one of the regions, all the good words were being stored. That is, let's say let's say the movie is spectacular, it's beautiful, it's well directed. So all these words will be clubbed together into one region of the space, and on the a different region, you will have all the bad words, or all the words which will have a negative review. That is, let's say, worst review, or worst movie, or a bad movie. So things like that. So visualization is the key. I think if you visualize the data correctly, even though you are using a very basic algorithm, if you know where you are going wrong, you can still correct it, and your model will work fine. So just search for visualizing word embeddings.
Okay. And did we get that question, TensorFlow versus PyTorch one?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So next question we have is, From Revati again. Would you prefer implementing ML model as a web application or mobile application, or building a model to be integrated as such?
I think I think it's more of a personal choice, I believe. But having it as a web application is still, I will say, because people use more mobile phones. So something that is used for mobiles is definitely, that can be deployed on a mobile phone, is helpful. But at the same time, let's say if somebody does not want to download the app, for any reason, so then they can directly use TensorFlow from their browser itself. So I think both of them have good approaches. It's just that if which use case you are trying to solve. So let's say if you are trying to solve a problem where you have to click a photo of the food, and then you have to identify if the food is good or bad, or maybe if or maybe if you have to identify which category does it belong to. Maybe it's a non-veg item, it's a veg item. So at that time, you cannot expect you cannot expect that you bring your laptop and then using the webcam, you take to the laptop and then click a photograph. So the easier option is to have it on a mobile phone. You just take out your mobile phone, open the application, click a photo of it, and then um, use that for your machine learning model. So, and then of course you can have a hybrid. So you can even have an app, or you can even open it via your web application from your mobile phone. So I think it depends on the use case.
Yeah, that's a valid answer actually. So depending on the problem you're trying to solve, you can choose whether you want to go for mobile applications or web app.
Yeah.
And I guess there is one application from Google itself. It's called as Machine Learning with Google. So they have this portal where actually you can uh, train your images like through webcam, and you can export the model in a pickle or in any form, in open network form, so that you can use that model in any application, whether it's a Android phone or it's a web app, whatever it is. So you can just give a try to that, but it's only related to, I mean, there are limitations. There are few limitations. You can do an image and you can do a voice. So you have to have a look. I guess me and Som actually explored a lot that too, because we were playing along with it, and then we encountered, okay, we can actually export this and can use in like any application. So I guess we have, okay, we answered all the question. Wow, that's quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So apart from that, folks, any more questions? You can raise hand. Mhm. If not, then we would wrap up soon. Okay, there's a question. So this question is from Thiru again. He's asking, like, can you suggest some basic projects that bring confidence in TensorFlow?
Okay, I think there's an important answer, because when I got started with machine learning, it was difficult for me to get complete a project, because I thought that all of them are pretty difficult. So I will recommend a couple of projects. So first is that if you're working with image data, then probably go with um, digit recognition. Basically, you have to given an image, you have to identify which digit does it belong to. So the image can be from any digit 0 to 9, and then you have to predict whether it is a digit 1 or 2 or 3. So that's very basic, because the data set is only black and white, and less number of pixels, so easy to start. Second, if you want to work with text data, I will recommend the movie review one, which is also good. So either you can go with movie review or Yelp review. That's good. And if you want to go with basic machine learning one, then you can go with Titanic dataset from Kaggle, which is a very basic dataset. And at the same time, you can also go for Iris, basically Iris dataset about flowers. So you can go for any of these four.
Okay. So how many times or how many projects shall I do to be, get enough confidence in TF?
I think if you start doing like a couple of them, if you do 2 or 3 of them, you will have good confidence, and then you can pick up some project quickly, look at the use case, and then solve it quickly. So that's going to help a lot of your.
Very vast. yeah, the library itself is very huge. I mean,
Yeah,
like when what is also a question, right? So I
yeah.
guess it also the answer also lies in what kind of use case you're trying to solve, right? So
Mhm.
if you're doing like let's say 3 to 4 projects in computer vision itself, then you'll be pretty confident that hey, the next problem I could solve it. It might take very less time as compared to previous one.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean you can actually try that. So be you can narrow down your problem statement, or I would rather say a domain, and then you can try with different projects.
yeah.
Yeah. So next question we have from Revati, and it's not a silly question at all, Revati. That's fine. And she's
Hmm.
asking how to make people look into your works on GitHub.
Yeah, I think so good. So first of all, if you're doing something original, people will have a look at it. If you're doing something which actually adds value to an actual implementation, that makes sense. So what I do is probably I try to improve algorithms, or if I'm working on something new, then that's fine because I know that this is an original work. Or if I'm working on something which has already been done, then I try to look at it if I can improve the value of it somehow. Okay. And then of course, if you post it on your if you have your own blog, or if you can post it on, let's say, LinkedIn, so that people who have similar interests can look at it, and then maybe share it, like it, and even they can fork it and then try it out their own. So that's how I do it. Maybe open sourcing it and making sure your documentation is well maintained. That's how people who want to work can actually work, if your documentation is good. And try to make it clean, as in that part should also be clean, so that people are able to understand what we're trying to write. And that's how you will get more and more people onto your page, and interested about your work.
Yeah, so I would add like few more points for that. So whatever project you're working on, just try to keep it on that. So your work is like up to date on GitHub repo.
Yeah.
So apart from that, if you're writing a blog, just mention your repo as well, so that if you're writing a blog about you did some computer vision application, this, you wrote entire thing how you did it, and then you
Hmm.
can also mention your repository, like this is what dataset sample is, and this is how the program looks like, and you
Hmm.
can link both the things. So this way actually even if people are sharing your blog, indirectly they're sharing your GitHub repo as well, that
Hmm. Hmm.
it will be helpful for them basically. So I won't say you have to invest a lot of time in making or convince people to what you say visit your GitHub repo. So whatever
Yeah.
work you're doing, just keep it up to date and try to use the repo link wherever is possible. So even if you're on LinkedIn, or if you're sharing your application, like hey hey folks, I made this application, have a quick look on this. So you can apart from application name or what it does, you can actually mention your code repository there. So these are the
Hmm.
few things which might work. I hope that answers your question, Revati. So apart from that, I guess yeah, we are done with all the questions. So folks, if you have any other questions, what you can do is you can ping on Meetup page, or I would rather to say you can ping Akshay over Twitter as well. You can start a thread as well, and we can
Yeah.
add into the same thread so that he can answer those questions.
Yeah.
So
Definitely do that.
yeah, so we have come to the end of this session. We took actually more time than expected, and actually, like I'm really happy because we got a lot of nice questions. So
That's true.
I was not expecting like this kind of question would come, because we just explained about applications, but other than that, my God. So really amazing audience. So thanks all for attending this session, and we will make sure that next time we'll try to do meetup on meet.google.com, where you won't find any difficulties in rendering videos and all. Apart from that, we'll also try to do hands-on session on TensorFlow, but this might take little bit time because we have to manage some sort of logistics. Although it's a virtual event, we have to make sure everything is working perfect, so that on the event date we won't face any failure. But we will do that, and yeah, apart from that, we will give you certificates for sure, because this question was raised in last meetup as well. So once our certificates are done, we have your email IDs and name with the registration. So we will send you those. So don't worry about that. I hope you like the session. And if you have missed any part of video, we will be uploading this video soon on YouTube as well. So if you are subscribed to our channel, you will get a notification. Even if you are not subscribed, you can directly go to GG Chennai channel and then you can watch the video. So we will be posting you on a meetup as well. So I hope this session was useful to all of you. So yeah, thanks. We are closing this event now.
All right.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much, man. Take
Yeah,
care.
thank you, Akshay.
Bye.